So, hello everybody, good morning. Welcome to this webinar on Catalogue of Public Services. Today is mostly devoted to the proposal for the metadata model of the SDG on the cataloging of public services. So far we have muted all of you to avoid any noise, but later on we will give you the power back to take the floor in the course of the different presentations. And the good news is this time we are recording the webinar, so in any case, for those colleagues of you that cannot attend the webinar today and other member states that cannot do it either, and the recordings will be available in SDG Wiki and in Join Up. So here in Brussels we are sitting, the whole team of Catalogue of Services, so basically we have Emilio, Caroline and Florian that say hello to all of you a few minutes ago, and we also have other ISA² colleagues from CEMIC and e-procurement, the legal side actually of the ISA² unit. Thank you very much for your patience, because we published the proposal on 10 days ago, on Friday, 2 weeks ago actually, because we had some internal discussions to make sure that we were addressing the right things when it comes to the SDGs. So we had some internal discussions with GROW and DIGIT, and for the SDG coordinators, the model was shared a week ago, because we also wanted to find the right language, more policy making oriented. IT managers, not to, let's say, upload something very technical that could put people off. That's why we created a nice example with the collaboration of the colleagues of GROW. In any case, today is the first discussion on the SDG data model. We have already issues raised by some member states like Italy and the Netherlands. But don't worry, because at the end of the webinar we will also give the floor to the other member states that didn't send yet their comments. We know that it was short notice, and you can take the floor and maybe give us your first reaction. But we would appreciate if in coming days you use GitHub or you send us an email with your comments. And next week on Friday, the 21st of February, we will have another round of discussions face-to-face here in Brussels. So for those coming to Brussels, you are welcome, and we will have the discussions, we hope, in a very productive way next week. So starting by the agenda today, So first of all, we will introduce the objectives of this webinar, and then we will do a recap of what we tried to achieve with this data model, and then we will go to the presentation itself of the SDG model, and we will have later on the discussions on particular issues raised by some member states. You will have the possibility to take the floor to vote. We want to do it in a very efficient way, so we are going to ask you to vote. You can always take the floor, certainly, but for those that would like to give their views, you can also vote using the link that we will provide to you. Finally, we will give you a reminder on the upcoming events and the wrap-up, how we are intending to continue with the discussions. So I give the floor to Florian, and he will be guiding you through the webinar.
Thank you, Miguel. Welcome, everyone. So let's start briefly with a short intro, but really summarizing what Miguel really introduced already. So indeed, the focus of this webinar is about the SDG regulation and how we can have a further discussion now based on the model we shared with you 10 days ago. So let's start first with a short recap on, okay, what is our approach for defining this model and why is it needed? So, okay, we talk about SDGR. Not every participant is maybe familiar with the regulation. So what are we talking about? It's really the objective to create a single digital gateway, so a single point of access for citizens and businesses to find information about public services. And where could they find this? From a single portal, Your Europe, which would redirect for more detailed information towards the national portals. And what are the possible applications that we think beyond and behind the Signal Digital Gateway regulation? It's really, first, as mentioned, a website, but then also a search tool to find the proper information. So search tool and assistance finder. Then a way to get feedback for the users to give feedback to national, regional, and European authorities. And finally, a way to later on authenticate in order to receive services directly, fully online, and also a way to gather statistics on the usage of the portal, on the usage of the information and the services provided through the portals. Then, what are the important dates to keep in mind? The first one is December of this year, where basically information about rights, obligations, rules, procedures, assistance and problem-solving services will have to be shared at the European level. And we talked there about services provided at national levels. But this does mean that if, for example, regions are the competent authority for delivering certain services or providing information about those services, those information should also be shared at European level. Then by December 2022, this should be also implemented by municipalities. Sorry for the ringtone. By municipalities. And so meaning local levels, and by the end of 2023, we should not talk only about information, but also about really providing the procedure in a fully online manner. And the list of procedures is available in the different annexes. And of course, for the last deadline, we talk also about how to provide it in a way that is compliant with the one polling principle. So, let's briefly discuss about the repository of links. If you have comments or questions about here this short recap, we have planned a moment at the end of the recap so that you have the time to really raise your concerns or questions. So here, when we are entering into the website application layer at the European level, what is really important as a concept is to understand what is behind the repository of links and the type of information that you will need to provide, in which language, and we give a short summary on the right side, but this doesn't include all the concepts, all the information that you need to provide, but it's really the most important one. So we talk about the link towards the web pages where the information is published. The country, of course, so to which service are we talking about, and what is the country that is behind this service, in which language is the information provided, and who or what is the competent authority behind this service. So those are information that you should provide within the repository of links or make accessible. And then once we go one level deeper, the detailed descriptions of the public service should be made available at national levels. And there we talk about many more concepts, and it's really written or mentioned within the regulation that even though we know that at the European level it's not easy to provide one single portal at national level, but that would ease the collection of and the harvesting of the different information towards your Europe portal. You may have seen we shared on the SDG Wiki a presentation that we'll also make available on JoinUp or GitHub, or both probably, And in this presentation, we give a small example of a mock-up of, let's say, imagine on the left side we have a mock-up of one page of the search facility on your Europe, and we can identify easily, for example, on the top right, that you can select the language in which you would like the page to appear. Then on the left, you can find and you can select, okay, I would like to, I'm a citizen, I'm a business, I'm an administration. Depending on that, you could find different information. You can select the country, the level of authority or the level of services you are looking for. And you could also search even through the search tab or directly to live events. Those are it's just a demo of what it could look like. But definitely there's a need to structure the information and a need to enable the end users to easily search and find the information online. And okay, on the right side of
Florian?
Go ahead.
Yeah, one question, Robert from Germany. What is the difference between the level local and national?
It's really the level of authority that is providing the service, and by providing the service, you should consider it very broad, meaning describing the service also on web pages. Meaning, for example, you would like to register a newborn in your municipality. This is definitely a local service, a local level.
And we should provide information to the SDG to enable the selection of these levels.
So, depending on the deadlines, you should provide definitely information about the information listed within the annexes and the regulation for the SDG, so at the European level, yes.
Okay. And the level is an attribute in the data model.
So, indeed, the idea of this whole webinar is to see, okay, how can we structure the information, and to propose a first model that has been shared a couple of days ago, and on which we have received some comments that we would like to discuss with you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. You're welcome. And so on the right side of this slide, you can see that this is an example of how information can be structured in tables in your respective organizations. For example, for a service, you can have the title of the service, then the country to which it's related, or then the geographical level, and then is it related to a certain event, who is the owner of the public service, and in which languages is this public service available. And then from there you can see also that you can specify further, for example, the event itself or the public organization that is behind. So, for example, the owner of the public service described here is the municipality of Madrid. So the public organization name is municipality. Here we took a different example. Okay, municipality of Utrecht. Okay, sorry for the confusion. And then you have a preferred label. So the name by which you would like this organization to be usually described or called. Again, the geographic coverage. And a contact point or multiple contact points. This is just an example of how the information can be structured with different levels of your organization. And of course, one issue that we have is it's fine. We all have different ways of describing and structuring our public services. And this is the biggest challenge, is how to reconcile those different structures in order to enable the exchange of information and the retrieval of this information easily. Not to have to do all this work manually, because we talk about hundreds of thousands of different descriptions. So what we see usually is that people usually have Excel spreadsheets following different structures, or they sometimes have PDF or docs or Word documents that they share internally with the different descriptions. This is fine if you keep it at, let's say, local level, but as soon as you want to exchange information between different organizations and countries, it makes the whole organization much more complex. So the idea with the model is really to move from this approach to a more structured approach where we look at a similar structure and we know we can harmonize the way we describe public services. It doesn't mean that you cannot keep your own way of describing services, but you need at least a thin layer that harmonizes the exchange of key information at the European level. Yes. Yeah. Indeed, Marco in the chat mentioned that, or asked, if the SDG information areas are also relevant pieces of information for the repository of links, and yes, the answer is definitely yes. And it's actually within Annex 1, if I'm not mistaken. It's completely listed, the different areas, and it's also a proposed specification for the SDG data model. And so, quickly moving on, if we take the case of public administration, it can be a municipality or a local or regional level. It owns different public service data, and it can produce structured data out of it, structured descriptions of this public services. And for that, ideally, it would use the SDG data model, or at least map their current way of structuring to the SDG data model. And based on that, a higher or broader public administration, so for example, at national level, could directly collect the descriptions. Here we put the example of using APIs for doing this, but there are different ways. And based on that, it could, from those descriptions, it could produce and publish a catalogue of services at national or regional level. And for Europe and within the SDG, this would mean that the repository of links could retrieve and collect the structured information, again, in the most automated way possible from those national or regional catalogs, and publish it, or publish the relevant information on your Europe. And this would enable a typical user, such as Marcus here, to search and find assistance to find the right services, the right descriptions. And now to move on to really the approach we used to build this model. This is something we shared already in November. So since then we have been applying it for building the model that we shared a couple of days ago. So we will start from the text of the regulation, identifying the concepts that you can find an example on the left. So from Article 10, we looked at the quality of information and procedures, and we found concepts like users, identify, procedure, etc. And from those concepts, we listed them, we put the reference, and we started analyzing them, also finding the concepts that are different in terms of names, but that have similar meaning in terms of semantic. And we map those concepts to existing data models in order not to reinvent the wheel, but really to try to reuse what is existing. And we link these concepts with relations. We have shared, again, online a full description, and there is also some really user-friendly explanations online. So if you have questions about how this approach, etc., feel free to contact us as well. Are there questions so far? Yep.
Okay, so in fact, in some slides ago, okay, you have shown the use case for publishing. You have shown the use case for publishing the a public service, so by public administration sending the data through the data model. And my question is whether this is not preceded by a use case for a public administration to be registered. So, and also because I was wondering whether the level of the public service does not belong finally as an attribute to the public administration directly. Would it be possible that a municipality offers a service at national level? It's a question, I don't know, and maybe it's a question also for the audience, you see. And, but also the fact that the public service, I don't know whether you take into consideration the fact that a municipality would have to be registered first as being a potential provider of public service, or whether you just consider that each public service provides. When they access this use case, they give again all their data. You understand my question or not?
For me, it's not completely clear.
Florian, maybe can I? So I think for the first part, if I understood it well, the question was: is it possible that a municipality, so a local public administration, provides a national public service? Not sure if I understood it well, but that's exactly why we make the difference between, on the one hand, I think it was called on one of the examples, geographical area. So that's so there's a difference between the competent authority of a public service and the one who is responsible for executing it towards citizens or businesses. So the competent authority can indeed be a national agency, a national public administration, a ministry. For instance, when it comes to the, let's say the legislation around marriage, yeah, that's going to be a national legislation. And that's a national public service that is offered for the whole country. Everybody can benefit from it, but the execution of that public service is done, for instance, locally. So you need to go to your municipality to actually request that service and to execute it, and it's a local administration, local public servant that will do the execution of that public service. So there's a difference between who's in the end responsible for the definition and let's say management of the service, and who's responsible for the execution, and that's the difference that we try to make also. And I think for instance in the not in the single indicator, but in the single market regulation. Sorry?
Point of single contact.
Yeah, the point of single contact. They call it the competent authority, I think, who is in the end responsible for. But that can differ from the one who actually is responsible for.
I think that for now it's not very clear, this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so my question was related to the level, because it was the level of the service, because I've seen that you make so this, when you publish the public service, it's you need to provide this attribute, and I was wondering whether it was an attribute belonging to the public service, or whether it was belonging to the authority executing the public service. You see?
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. Yeah.
And then my question, because I was thinking about that, I thought that maybe there would be a better use case where the executing public administration registers itself first, and then registers the public services that it has to provide, you know. So it's just a question.
Yeah, and this is a question we also received as part of the issues we would like to discuss later. And definitely, for now, the position for the SDG was the public administration delivering the public services should be the one describing it using the model. Okay. Meaning that if you have 300 municipalities delivering birth certificates, and each of them is, even though there is probably a national description made by a national authority on national portal, there should be also 300 maybe approximately different descriptions with some specificities like opening hours, like contact points, etc. Meaning that all those descriptions will be related to a different public services. That should be, and that's why we have a relationship related between public services, so that it would ease also the retrieval for a national administration or for an end user, and also making the links between public services that are actually the same but delivered at a different level, or so that you could a user could easily say, oh, I'm looking for this service within this local level, this municipality, and the link will be automatically made. So that's the idea, but I propose to discuss it a bit later when we come back to this issue. Thanks. Any other points?
This is Dimitri from the top project. I would like to understand something in the clarification of what is a service on your model and what is the procedure. Could you go please a few slides back when you have some tables, which you have some services and some procedures before.
Yeah, I'm going.
Yeah. This okay here. Let's take to that one. So you state that a service is requesting proof of registration of birth. This sounds more like a requirement of a service or an outcome of a service. So
yeah,
what is it? Because from what we have seen, a service might be I don't know. It's called a procedure or it's something that executes a procedure. It's kind of vague what the SDG defines, but at least this service or procedure provides an outcome, which would be the proof of registration of birth. Okay, but that's the outcome. But also requires some input, some evidences.
Yeah,
could be a request of proof of registration. So what is service here?
So I fully agree with you, and actually we should change this example because here I reuse directly the terminology from the list of procedures from the Annex 2, if I remember well, meaning that as a title of the public service it should be described differently. But definitely within the model, what we have foreseen so far is to have a classification where you can make the link between the title of the public service you are giving as the owner of the public service and the procedural or the procedure that is listed within the annex and to which you need to comply within the regulation. And yeah, that's what we have foreseen as part of the model. But so if you have different opinions about this, let's discuss. But so far the service is more towards something that can be easily understood by end users as well. But of course it's also we give freedom to the public administrations to decide what they want, how they want to call the different services. But we definitely differentiate it from for example, the procedural steps made by, or the actions required by the public administration or by the user, the requester, because we really model this in a different way with the class actions that is really defining and describing those different steps that you need to go through depending on your role. Does it clarify the?
Yes. A bit from my part, it is clarified. So, and one more question on the slide, which you have the APIs,
Yep.
Which it wasn't clear to me. Yes, that one. So, I have a public administration which owns data and a public administration that collects structured metadata. For me, it's not clear who provides what and who consumes what here. It is kind of difficult to understand. So there are collections of data. There is ownership of data.
Yeah,
something that produces structured data. But if you want to express kind of a procedure that consumes data or provides more information, I don't think that I can see it clearly here. It's not helpful, I think. So maybe we can see maybe later another example of how data is being actually used, generated, or consumed by public administrations and how these are communicated between public administrations.
Yeah. So here I agree. This slide is a bit complex in the structure. In general, depending on who is describing the public service and who is executing it, you have different public administrations at different levels that can produce the descriptions and maintain it. And of course, it doesn't mean that those public administrations will be the one responsible for implementing the SDG or legally responsible, let's say. But as part of the SDG, this should still be on board for respecting the SDG data model in order to harvest the different descriptions they produce in a harmonized manner. So it means that for example, the SDG data model can be respected as from the first step, meaning as from the moment you describe your public service digitally, or it can be done a bit later, meaning that you have already existing descriptions in, for example, a spreadsheet, and then it means that you will need to map this structure to the SDG data model in order to comply with it, and in order to enable later on the retrieval of your information in a proper manner. That's also possible. And then the last possibility that we see, but we don't recommend this one because it makes it more difficult, is when we need to create a collection of your descriptions as they are, and then we map them so a posteriori to the SDG data model, and based on that we publish the information in a structured manner, structured in a harmonized manner compared to the other descriptions that we receive from other public administrations. So depending on your level and on your context, your status, you can either produce or share or map the different your descriptions to the other public administrations at other levels. That's the main idea of this slide.
Yeah. Okay.
Just for your first question, Jerry, I think that the example here, it was not bad because you can see providing an evidence as also a public service, because you may need this evidence to go outside of the realm of administration. So it's not mandatorily to be applied. An evidence may be used by other services, but it can be also used per se outside of the administration. So it can be a public service to provide this evidence. I see it like this. I don't know if
Yeah. It's not that clear, but after the discussion, I could also agree with what you're saying, Cecile. Yes, but initially it was not that clear.
Maybe what we can propose to improve such a slide is to invert the direction of the arrow when there is the collect operation. So let's say the collect shows the transfer of the data from the local one to the national part, and also from the national to the European level. So the collect arrow should change direction. I think that will be improved the readability of the slide.
But thank you. Yeah, in general, I think this slide is trying to summarize in one visual too many cases. So I would, probably it's better to look at the different cases in a separate manner and not all together. But okay, let's. I propose to move on. But if you have questions about the use cases, don't hesitate to contact us or to raise a point on GitHub or directly at the end of the webinar. So I propose to move on to the model itself. And there, again, we have prepared an example of how the model could be used with an existing example, meaning here we used, let me open the page. So first of all, let's show you. So all the information about the model is available on GitHub, which I'm displaying right now on the screen, with a short intro and description with the different documents that are available, and you can find those documents in the pre-release folder here. I go to, you can find the different descriptions in different formats. The example, the detailed analysis that we made, and what you can also find is how to create issues directly. And here you see that I'm not connected to GitHub, so it's not required to have an account in order to access all the information and to open issues. And you see existing issues that were raised by different users. And from those issues, you can either first react on it if you have similar concerns, or if you have some propositions to solve the issue, or if you have a new issue that is not tackled in the list, you can create a new one from here, and there you will need to sign up to GitHub. Signing up, you can do it with any email address you would like to use, so feel free. And we are not checking the email addresses, so this is definitely not very the core part of this. That's for GitHub. And so you can see here an overview of the SDG data model as we proposed it. In yellow are the what we call the new classes, in the sense that those are classes that were so far not included within CPS-VAP, the core public service vocabulary. And in blue are the classes that are already within CPS-VAP. And finally, the elements written in red are the elements that we see as mandatory in order to use this model in a proper manner. So meaning, for example, you should have a public service with a title. It's too small now to state, but we will dive into the content later on. And so on the right side of the slide, you can see a screenshot of the public service form that we used as the example. And so we used two sources of information. One was this web page, with different explanations about the public service, how to get protected occupational titles in Finland. So, for example, you're a doctor who studied in Bulgaria, in Belgium, or in any country, and you would like to be recognized as a doctor in order to practice in Finland. You need to get a proper occupational title, and this is what Valvira, the public organization, can give you. And when you go here, you can see the form in PDF that you can use. And this form, for now, is I think not available, but we have the form in Finnish at least that you can find here. And that's what we use in order to structure it and describe it in a way that that is compliant with the SDG data model. And so if I go back to the slides, voila. If I go back to the slides, if we focus, for example, on the first part, so really on the title, the public organization that is behind, etc., you see that there's different information available, and also some from directly the website, where we use the title directly given by that we retrieved directly on the web form, or on the web page in this case. It doesn't mean that it's the title used directly within the administration itself. It's just our interpretation of the information from the sources we had access to. The identifier we use for now the URL of the web page, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe there is a URI policy within Finland, and then they use it directly. As an external reader, that's the one we use. Then in the description is the description provided on the website. So in order to work in the profession, etc. Then you see that the public organization was also identified. Then the channel was identified with the web page that is behind, pointing to the web page that I just showed you. And finally, you see that in order to get this public service, you will need at least one action, which is really providing the web form so submit an application to Valvera, and then they will go through the different elements described and annexes described in your application and decide whether you can access this title or not. And the processing time for this is a period of 4 months. So this is really a quick overview of how you could use the model to describe services. It doesn't mean that it's the only way of doing it, but it's one way of using the model. And of course, we received some comments on how to improve this, and we are very welcome to receive other comments. But the idea behind of this example is to help you have something tangible to look at in order to review the model behind. So it's really how to improve the model based on this example. And so before diving into the model, let's recap also on some of the key principles we had in mind in order to build this model. Is really to make it as simple as possible, so not including elements that are not required, and we will discuss some of those points later on. Really making it as user-friendly as possible and interoperable for the exchange of information to work. Of course, tailored to the SDG regulation and the deadlines. So for now, it's focusing mostly on sharing information and not on the once-only principle and the delivery of public services. This is a discussion we should have also. Easy to map with existing models at member states. So that's where we definitely need also your input, because you are the owners of your own data models, existing data models, and if you see that there are some issues, please raise them to us. And finally, we try to the maximal extent to be compatible with the CPSVAP. And you see with all the blue classes that we achieved this point also quite to the maximal extent possible. With that being said, I propose to dive in the discussions. And let's start directly with an overview of the different inputs received in the last few days. Yeah. And there are comments in the chat. Yeah. From Robert, right, Emilio? So there is a comment from Robert from Germany. Talking about XUFI, so this is the national model used in Germany for describing and exchanging information about public services. And yeah, we are well aware of XUFI. We have received a description from a German colleague, and we have started mapping the model to the SDG and CPSVAP. And so, Robert, I will be really keen to contact you in a few days to discuss the outcomes of this mapping. Once we have a better understanding of XUFI and how close it or how far is it to the SDG data model. In the meanwhile, if you see already some differences, don't hesitate also to provide your input on GitHub. Yes, sorry. So your question was, does it need to be adapted? I would say no, definitely not. This is not the objective, but definitely you will need to describe the information in a certain structure. So if we provide you with a mapping, we can automatically also, if there is a full mapping, of course, a one-to-one mapping, we can automatically transform the structure of your information if it is machine readable. So that you don't have to change the structure at the national level. That's the whole purpose of creating an interoperable model. Yeah, and this is normally true also for Austria. Voilà. Should we dive into the the issues. Thanks, William. So we described in this slide the 4 different categories of issues we received. We would like to thank everyone who contributed to sending us the issues, because we know it was a very short deadline, so thank you very much for the effort. And for everyone else, there is still time to share your issues, but I will tell more about it later. So the 4 categories of issues are missing SDGR concepts in the model, some general issues in the specification, class and property issues, and detailed technical issues and errors. The next slide will show what are the goals for the next part of the webinar. So we want to discuss with you the input we received, and we want to come to some proposed solutions, if possible, and agree of a part of the model via consensus. The process we want to approach here is, if there are discussions during this webinar on some new issues of the model, we want to publish these issues on GitHub. And now you will receive an additional week of review where you can share your issues on GitHub again, so that you can discuss this during the workshop of the 21st of February. If there would be no objections on GitHub on the current issues within this week, we would like to close them, but it's still, of course, yeah, if there would be some objections afterwards, we will of course take them into account. So it's not because we close the issues that they can be reopened. On the next slide, let's dive into it. So there are some missing SDGR. So first I will tackle the question of Marco. The exact deadline of the second review, I will let you know in a few minutes. But first, the missing SDGR concepts in the SDG model. So yes, there are some concepts missing. For example, means of redress, means of appeal, delays, etc. And we are well aware of this, but we had some reasons to not include them. For example, there is in parallel discussions of an update of the core criterion and core evidence vocabulary, so we didn't want to do double work or some work that would be not more relevant in the future if they would change the class. So we are waiting on them for that. And the other thing is that there are parallel discussions, for example, on the feedback through the Implementation Act. And we are as well waiting on the outcome of those discussions to implement these classes or properties in the model. And then the last reason is to reduce complexity. So we described 3 options. A light and flexible model that can be easily extended by the member states, more complete but also more complex model that will contain all SDGR concepts, and a hybrid solution somewhere in the middle. So we really want to ask the question to you, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a more light model, a more hybrid model like the way it is now, or a more a complete model that you really know if you describe the information to the data model, you will be compliant to all parts of the regulation. So let's finish the poll. Maybe first a question of Cecile, and in the meantime you can launch the poll in the chat.
Well, I have one question. It's about the fact that I think that this model should also cater for the needs of the single digital gateway portal. And then the problem will be that if you don't have the functionality such as feedback or other, well, now I'm thinking of feedback, let's say, and statistics, blah, 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 then you would lose these requirements. So these requirements will not be addressed, and I don't think that it could be addressed by extensions at member state level. So I think that there is a level of complexity that we cannot avoid due to the requirements of the single digital gateway regulation. It's just that point. So there is no full choice here. It's okay.
for now, as mentioned by Karian, the model does not describe all the elements needed to comply fully to the SDGR. By fully, we understand like all the elements that are needed for the deadline of 2023. So how to give fully online public services. Because the core focus right now of public administrations is on the deadline of this year for providing information about those public services. In the meanwhile, we have shared a link to the poll in the chat. If I click on it, you see that there is a question about the concepts that are missing, so in your perspective. And you can either suggest a new element or like an element that is proposed. If you don't know right now how which elements are missing, don't hesitate to indicate it on GitHub. There's a dedicated issue to this, right? Can you confirm a dedicated issue for the missing concepts?
Not yet.
Not yet, but we'll create an issue related to this. If you don't find one immediately, you can create it, but that's definitely something that we will include. Then, the poll doesn't work for me. Oh. It's not the only one empty page. Otherwise, we can also create directly a new poll. It's really easy. We'll create a new poll question, exactly the same, but re-updating the link. So we'll share it in a second, and maybe we can do it also for the second just to make sure. Is there any other reaction regarding this issue?
No, I have a question. Just that maybe others know, but I don't. So the scope or the goal of this model, is it to just provide descriptions in a structured way, or it is meant to cater for automated processes and machine-to-machine communication? What's the main goal of this application profile?
So for now, it was mostly for structuring the description, so mostly at the information level. But of course, yeah. So the target was indeed for being applied for the repository of links. But it should definitely be used in combination with the machine-to-machine readability and with the provision of public services later on. We don't see it as the only semantic layer that you need for providing public services, but definitely it should be complementary to what will, for example, come out of the TOLF project of TOLF. Does it clarify your question?
Okay. Okay, which means that if we have some requirement to add or some things to add that cater for better machine-to-machine, let's say, communication, we should add them, and because this is in scope.
Yeah. Okay, and I see that the link to is it in the second poll, Karian?
Yeah, in the second poll. The first poll does work, so there might be an issue, a technical issue, a specific technical issue. So you can just respond in the chat, and we will take it definitely into account.
Yeah, and the second poll, how to say should the SDG data model? So yeah, do share your input. For example, should it cover as right now? Should it cover the full implementation of the SDG, or should it be more focusing on the information side? So really on the first part for the first deadline. Yep. And then would you prefer only a model that covers the requirements from SDG and leave out all other elements, or would you prefer a model that keeps concepts that are key in general for describing public services independently from the SDG, and but would of course be marked as optional? For example, member states who do not have an existing data model right now and would like to implement one, they could start directly from there. Yep. Okay. So let's have a quick look at the results. So most people mentioned that they would like a hybrid solution somewhere in the middle. While 4 mentioned that very light and flexible model that can easily be extended by member states, and finally 3 complete but more complex model. So yeah, we do see that there is a need for multiple things within the model. And indeed, our current approach was kind of hybrid, where we have mandatory elements, but those mandatory elements are really a few. So this would tend to comply with the very light proposition, while we propose for other organizations that would like to have a more complex and or fully described model, yeah, some also proposition and recommended class.
Yeah, this is Miguel. I just wanted to say, because here I can see that we only have in this poll 15 people. So maybe you can instruct your colleagues coming next week to the workshop on what is your views, because I think we will run the same poll next week, where we will have a large number of member state representatives to get maybe a more reply to this question.
Okay. I go back to the slide. Should I open the first? Yeah. So apparently it doesn't had a big success for this one. So let's move on. Yeah, no worries. I think since some people had issues connecting, etc., to this one, let's move on. But definitely, if you have missing elements, don't hesitate to raise your points or to share it with us. Yeah, Karim, I give you back the floor.
Right, thanks all for your input. For the next issue we received, it is retrieving product descriptions might be useful, but it is beyond the scope of the SDG. We looked into this, and the SDG requires information to be accurate and up to date. It may be carried out automatically between the relevant systems of the member states. So we see definitely a use case in the single digital gateway regulation that retrieving product descriptions is necessary, because for every update of your for a service, you would then need to update manually information on a portal, so this retrieving would be necessary. And another part of the regulation states that there should be a single source of information on a national level, which would mean that local municipalities, for example, would need to publish their data and send it to this single source of information, which makes retrieving all the more useful. So in our opinion, it's definitely in scope, but please, if you do not agree, share your opinion. Or if anyone else has an opinion on this. feel free to share. Right, if there are some objections later, please do come back, or if you want to react in the chat. Thanks. Okay, I will start with a comment from Marco. Maybe, Marco, can you elaborate a bit?
Yes, I think that in the link repository, you're correct. You made a distinction in the model between the core model containing the information which is useful for filling the link repository and keeping it up to date, and an extended model with all the rest, which information should reside on the national portals. So I think that it would be useful to fetch all the elements from the core model, such as title, information area, maybe modified date, but not the rest. I think, yeah, I still believe that's beyond scope of the SDG.
So, of course, I fully agree. In general, we only need to fetch the information that is relevant for the SDG. The question is always like, to what level of granularity do you stop? So, because in the SDG it's mentioned that you should provide enough information for the end users to clearly understand what's the procedure, what they should undertake as steps or as actions, etc., etc. So the question is really, okay, where do you need to stop? Because you say this is enough information for the users to know what to do, and if the person is entitled to receive the service or not.
Well, that all depends on what you want to show on the European portal. If you want to show all the information, like the procedural steps, on the European portal, yeah, fine, of course. But if it's just a lookup service on the European portal, like the screen you shared earlier, and the information itself resides on the national portals, I don't think it's necessary to retrieve all the information.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Indeed. So I also checked, and for the procedure, for the detailed procedure, apparently it's mostly on the national level. While for the general overview of the procedure, it's more on the European level. But let's also confirm this after the webinar, or if anyone has another input.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other question? Yeah, I see the point of Marcus. Data must be shared, however, how it is financed. And this is indeed always a recurring question that we also see in the workshops organized by DG Grow. But so, in general, for example, through this action, first, our support is giving you a model that you can reuse. That's the first step that we see. And then, for example, 2 weeks ago, we had a webinar describing tools for editing and harvesting public service descriptions. This is also some work that we are currently conducting. And if you would like to use those tools for the SDG data model, yeah, please contact us and inform us, because this is also how it goes in general. If there is interest from the member states to receive specific support, then there are some chances to receive this support. But if we don't know if you are interested or not, of course there will be no support behind. So definitely, please clarify really what are your priorities for complying with the SDG, and what kind of support are you looking for. and at least we can pass the message to the right person at the Commission. Yeah. Then Georgia had a question. The open portal should quickly contribute the end user to the service itself. Definitely. Otherwise, I would say otherwise we miss the point of the SDG, making the information easily findable and accessible.
Just for clarification, Marcus, you refer to data, personal data linked to the once only principle, or data linked to public services? Marcus?
You're muted.
Not necessarily personal, but for example regarding business.
Because we have to make a decision. What we are talking here is about information about public services. This data is open to the general public. It has not any personal data whatsoever. Information about businesses, citizens, evidences that have to be collected as part of this article, once only principle and the 21 procedures. This is a separate discussion, and tomorrow there is a workshop on the once only principle on the blueprint. So you can discuss this topic there, actually.
I have a general comment. I think that there is a bit of a confusion between the fact that the CPSV-AP is an action that is already for years, I don't know how many years, but is there as a common effort, endeavor for member states to be able to publish their public services totally outside of the single digital gateway, but it is used, and there are many classes in this model that are in fact used by some member states in this context for their own work without the context of SDG. And within the context of SDG, we want to reuse some of it to put it at a European level. But it's true that like the actions, they are now in the model, they are now in red, I think, and I guess it's so maybe it should be in red for the national level, but maybe and not at European level. So my question is whether you intend to have a profile around CPSV AP or something to highlight the mandatory elements for single digital gateway that are different from the CPSV AP.
So, of course, right now within CPSV-AP, the mandatory elements are really few. We talk about two classes that are mandatory. While for the SDG, it's kind of an application of CPSV-AP, but adding a few elements that are not within CPSV-AP and that are perceived as mandatory for the SDG. So, the SDG data model is definitely an application, meaning it's reusing existing models in order to, in a specific context that is made mandatory by law. So the objective is really to make this application as simple as possible for its use, intended use. So that's really the objective of the SDG data model. And definitely, I think this is joining the point of Marco. If there are some information that should be at the European level, those should be mandatory independently from, within the model, independently from the user of the model. While if there is information that should be made available at national or local level, this should also be clarified.
Yes, and actually we need to work on this maybe to distinguish the different use cases that can be addressed by these two different, not different, but different models in a way that the CPSV-AP from the very beginning was more targeting at helping national competent authorities to catalog the public services and also to expose the information in national, local, regional portals, lander portals, whatever. it's out there. It's not mandatory. Nothing is mandatory. So if a country is starting from scratch and they are digitalizing public services and they want to have a digital catalog of public services, it's a very convenient model, the CPS-VAT, and it can be extended. Like Italy, other countries actually tailor the data model to create a national catalog of digital services. In addition to that, in the context of the Services Directive, point of single contact, some countries also use this model to display the information to end users, to help them to find information about all sorts of administrative procedures and public services. Here, the model we are discussing today, that is a kind of subset of the CPS-VAT, is more to help competent authorities to fulfill the requirements of the single digital gateway. They need to provide the link to the different portals where the public services are. So the Commission has to collect this repository of links. So we are suggesting, okay, let's try to enrich the information about these links by providing some minimal information on what services are behind, because this is going to help a lot to the search engine of the SDG to find the right information and to direct to the business, to the citizen, to the right competent authority and the right place to dig in on a specific service. But we need some metadata in the CMS, in the content management system of the single digital gateway user interface platform, let's say, so that you go to this portal and you launch a query, a search for whatever kind of public service, and at least you are redirected. You get some meaningful results, and finally you can go to the different competent authorities, to the different member states. So this is one of the use cases. Potentially there are more, but the main use case we are addressing right now is to enrich the information about the links that have to be provided by member states for this repository of links that will help the search engine and the user interface of the SDG to provide good quality results, and also to improve the user experience, so that the citizen doesn't go to Google, because otherwise people will end up, typing in Google, I want to set up a business in this land or in whatever part of Germany or in this region in Spain. If we have this enriched information in the single digital gateway, this portal will provide better results rather than typing in Google whatever information you are looking for. And also will help also to make comparison, because there is a huge potential. You want to set up a business in 2 different countries, and you can compare what are the different administrative procedures, what is the administrative burden in different countries, looking at the information you get out of this first search of results. But at the end of the day, we are not replacing the national portal. The citizen eventually will have the information and the link, and will go to the competent authority to get detailed information and to launch the digital transaction itself. So maybe we need to, from our side, is homework to make a more catalog of different use cases that could be addressed by these 2 models, the SDG and data model and the CPS-VAT, and ask you to challenge it and to tell us how you see these different use cases we are addressing.
Thanks, and thank you for the different questions. Let's move on to the next issue. Where it's quite detailed. It's about 2 relation properties, and I'll let you go on, Kirian.
Yes. So we received the issue that the properties related and required are not in scope of the SDG. And it follows a bit the discussion we had in the previous slide. So those properties are not mandatory within the model. However, some public administrations may have related public services, sub-services, and while other countries have 1 public service. For example, Netherlands would have 1 public service, where Spain would have 3
services that would be aggregated to one public service. There is a need to describe such services for member states, so that's the reason why we added those properties. We therefore propose to keep the properties as they are right now. Yeah.
Also, this could be useful for automated machine process if you want to relate or require, let's say, one public service requires another one. If we want to automate such the procedure, then it could be interesting to keep the requires relation.
Yeah, so simply we could imagine the case where different public services can live independently from each other and can be asked by a user independently from each other. But if you ask, for example, one public service, it could require the delivery of other public services that could be also reached directly by in certain cases. And that's the reason why there are those two relationships. Do you see? Yeah, so I see, Marco, that you say that, okay, it's not mandatory, so it feels fine, but removing it simply would indeed keep the model even more simple. So, yeah, definitely correct, and that's where we need really your views, not only you, Marco, but in general, saying like, okay, do we see an interest in using those two relationships, or we are never using it, and so there is no really added value in keeping it. That's really what we are looking for as your inputs.
If you consider, if you consider SDG model as a restriction on the CPS-VAP, and in the CPS-VAP you put everything that can make it really rich. But SDG, so that you, because from what I don't see all these comments, but I understand from what that the reaction of many of the people here is to have the most simple thing that you can ever have. No, but it was 8 at the end. It was most of them were well, they were pushing back to go to simple. But and so the thing is that if you put in CPS-VAP all the better aspects and nitty-gritty details that would make it really flexible, automatic, blah blah blah, and in SDG you let the restrictions that are really mandatory to comply with the search, in fact, to provide this information for the search, I guess that it would be very nicely split. And you would not create this type of reactions, in fact, like the comment of make it simple, make it simple. I don't...
Correct. This is probably something to consider and to discuss further during the workshop in 10 days. So definitely don't hesitate to react on GitHub regarding this point. So whether we should make the SDG model as simple as possible and only keep the elements that are required for the SDG, or if we should include some elements even though they are not mandatory. We recommend to use them just to have a similar way of structuring and approaching those descriptions, because they might be required in order to make sense out of the information shared as part of the SDG. So, yeah, there are, I think, different perspectives, and we need to consider how to balance those.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is from Peter from also from TOP project. Regarding those two relationships to the public service I'm not sure if they can be really useful when doing automated processing, because the public service itself might not be always digital. So, but especially for the requires relationship, I'm a bit surprised that it exists, because I think you can also derive that from the criterion requirement, because if a public service requires some other public service, it probably requires the output of that public service. and you could also model that as a criterion requirement. So if there is you might also raise an issue with the creator seeking SV, why that relationship is there, because it only states it's a required public service that needs to be executed beforehand. But that's probably because the output is needed. So that output is somehow a evidence or something needed by this procedure. So I think there is another way to model it, and you can safely leave out the requirement requires relationship. The relates to is that kind of vague that I'm not sure if that really is useful to have in a meta model for the SDG repository of links. So.
Yeah. Thanks for the valuable input. So in general, yeah, indeed, there is the relationship requires, and there is also the class criterion requirement. For now, we are a bit cautious in touching the way we use criterion requirements and in changing it, because the core vocabulary that is behind has been quite reshaped at the moment. So, but definitely we should also maybe raise an issue on the core criterion and evidence vocabulary that is behind the criterion requirement class, to make sure that this is considered also in the discussions in their review, in their public review. Yeah.
If I may add, because that's making that relationship from going from a public service that has a certain criterion requirement, let's say a criterion, and then finding which other public service may be able to fulfill that, or provide the information to show fulfillment of the criteria. That's one of the topics we are really looking into right now, together with the CCEV team, and also with other teams within ISA, to bring together all those vocabularies to create a system where you can do this fully automated. So, like you say, this is indeed work in progress, which we are looking into to create that relationship. But I don't think that it is something that you need for the, let's say, the portal. It's more when you go to the once-only execution of the once-only principle where you need this. So, but it would be good to still have all the models be consistent at least.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm working for the evolution of the CCCV, jointly with Cecile and other participants. Yes, this is being taken into account. But please feel free to contribute in the issues of the CCCV, because right now is the moment, the right moment. And then for you to know is that the criterion is fulfilled based, or is proved based on evidences. Remember this vocabulary in core criterion and core evidences.
Yep.
Core evidence vocabularies. One of the things we are changing by now, thanks to the tool project Jerry is there, is that these evidences can be pure data provided by data providers, not only documents that may be or may not be structured. So this is one thing that is important for the public service to know how to get this data and how to read it, also based on the fact that it is provided by another service or by another service provider that is providing data. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we definitely need to keep in touch with the TCCV people, but I'm in front of the project officer responsible for the maintenance, so that's definitely something we are doing. Yeah. Let's move on.
Maybe
to
summarize, I heard the proposition to split the information concept over 3 models. So CPS VAP for a more extended model, where you can describe in very rich terms your data. An SDG extended model, so the one you can see now on GitHub, that would include all mandatory concepts for the SDGR, but nothing more. So also not including some classifications that would improve search of the single digital gateway. That would be part of the CPS VAP. And then the single digital gateway core model, which would be the information necessary for the repository of links.
Because I think it's a very important issue that we have this right. I would like to share now a poll in the chat, and just to see if I summarize it correctly and if this is what the majority of you think. And I've put now the poll in the chat. It's a yes/no question, but you can of course add your own option. So you can say yes but or no but or something else. So we'll give you a few seconds to connect to sorry. I didn't answer. Not too biased.
No, because there is what the definition included, and this is the last.
So all polls will remain open until the end of the webinar. So I propose to come back to it. So the poll is open. So please share your opinion. All right. So next slide provides us with the next issue. There is an unclear definition of the publication date. We brought back to what is described in the regulation. So the publication date includes the date of the last update of the information, and if the information has not been updated, the date of publication of the information. And this is to clarify, it's about the publication date of the national or local information, not publication date of the gateway publication. Before, though, there was this question about the date, the time. I read a question from Thomas. I think it would be helpful for the users if they could see or search the last update time or an effective date of the service. Yeah, so this is included, I think, with this property. So we propose to take over the definition of the regulation and put it in the specification. On the discussion, I think it's more in your ballpark. But in general, is this clear enough for you, or do we need to specify where it is published? Because in the proposed solution we say the date of publication of the information, but we don't say where this is published. Is it the date at national portal? Is it the date of the publication of the legal text? Or in general the date of publication on the web page by the competent authority? So that's where we need a bit your input. And in general, looking at the question from Georgia, not all issues are already on GitHub because we received some input via email, but definitely the objective is to, even if you share your input via email, we can put it on GitHub afterwards. But this is really the exceptional case. Let's say the ideal is if you look directly on GitHub and react directly to either to existing issues, either create new ones. That's the easiest way, of course. Thomas, maybe you want to clarify what you mean with the effective date?
Just a question with this comment, does anybody want to capture the fact that the legislation has changed and when this service provision will start have an impact and according and be in line with this new regulation, because in member states sometimes the service provision according to change according to a law, so that perhaps the publication data is related to the fact that the food regulation has changed according this signals the fact that from this date, after this data, service should be provided in such a way. I don't know the person that wrote this, whether he has something in this thing in mind.
So, of course, from the description that we directly reused in our proposition, the description from the regulation. So, and I see also in the chat that Marco said that the original publication date of the information should be on the local, should not be the legal date, but the date of publication on the portal. And on for local services by local authority, and for regional national services by the, so this would be more towards the first alternatives mentioned, so really on the web page of the competent authority, and the competent authority is the one owning the description and executing the service. Okay, that's clear. Does anyone has an objection or has another perspective on this?
No, because if I may, if it's to support the end user and internal processes of blah blah blah, the types we don't care. As the end user, I want to know yes, I want to know but
you want to know what's the validity of the information?
Yeah.
Usually. Okay, thanks everyone. I propose to move on to the next one. Norris, there are still many issues to be discussed.
Within the next issue, what we want to take on is about the language. Public service, as you know, is a class is linked to a channel, so we see the relation between us, a channel of public service, in which the information can be provided for. And the subclass, we have a web page, a subclass in the image that you see on the right. There is a link, of course, of how the information is provided, in which language the information is provided. So, in that sense, there is a relation that we established between channel and linguistic system over there. Linguistic system is a class that we already linked to it in feasibility between public service and linguistic system. So, the idea indeed is keep, of course, the relation between channel and linguistic system, but also keep the relation between public service and linguistic system, in case we want only part of the information related to the public service itself expressed in a separated language. So that's why we have this issue described first. And if you have any comment, we can discuss right now.
And should we describe directly the second issue on language, and we discuss it all at once?
Maybe.
Yeah, okay, there is a question on our side.
I wonder why you need an entity for linguistic system. Why do you need that?
The origin was indeed to express how the information is, in which language the information is provided.
Yeah.
So that was the original link between the public service and linguistic system. Then, of course, the information can be provided in different languages in different channels too. So per channel you might have a different language, which is indeed the relation that we are proposing over there. That's the need.
So it doesn't really change whether you have the linguistic system and you point to it with a relationship, or if you have properties, yeah, exactly, attributes within a class. In the end, within RDF, it's approximately the same, and the concept behind is exactly the same. You use the same methodology, the same approach.
And is it language, as I understand it, as a code list, an ISO
Yes,
code
correct.
list? Okay, so
Yes.
the ISO code list. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of the reference is done towards the one of the publication of this language.
Yeah, that's a list that is available within the classifications proposed for the SDG. So we point and we list the different elements, and we point to the classification as maintained by the publications office. Good. Any other reaction on this?
I have a question on this. You say that in the description that this linguistic system is to identify, I think, the description that is given about the public service, not about the public service itself, right? Is that correct interpretation of what you're stating here as description?
Yes, it's about the description of the public service itself.
Okay, shouldn't the linguistic system then be related to that description and not so much to the public service?
But what do you mean with description? The description within the public service itself?
Yes, you have a description now. In the public service class, you have a description.
Yeah.
It's going to be complicated because on the slide you say under the label description here you say public service information on different channels is described in a certain language. And from that description on the slide, I interpreted that the linguistic system is related to the description property of the public service in the model. So it's not so much about the...
I see what you mean. The description on the left side is the description of the issue. It's not relating to the description of the public service.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
So the linguistic system in the model is not related so much to the public service itself, but more to the description of that public service, right? Is that what you're stating on the slide?
It's related normally to the whole public service, but of course the core part of the public service is description.
Florian, I think the question is, what do we want to document with linguistic system? Is it the way? Is it a language in which the public service is described, so documented, or is it the way it is delivered? So if we go to a website and you see a description of the public service, is the linguistic system the language of that description? Or if I want to execute, if I go to the town hall and I request something, is the way I'm going to be treated, or the language I'm going to be treated, is that the linguistic system? I think that's the question, right?
I think the problem is because the linguistic system is a class that was defined and reused like that. But I think you need to pay attention to the properties. If the public service has a channel that is in the language of a certain linguistic system, this means that the user may use that language to communicate with the public service. Now, what is not maybe clear is the property linked to the public service directly to the linguistic system.
So,
yeah.
No, it's clear. Thanks for the different points. So the idea, and Emilio, correct me if I'm saying something stupid, but the idea is indeed that you can have the public service in different languages, really the descriptions, shared through different channels, and you can have also the execution through also different channels and contact points in different languages as well.
So your predicate should be a bit different, because language, channel, linguistic system is not
Or maybe you may have your own class that extends the linguistic or is equivalent to the linguistic system, so you make it a bit clearer.
We should clarify definitely in the description how it should be used, and so what is the idea behind, and what are the different use cases that we see, how to use those different relationships in class.
Yeah. What you could also do is have just two relationships from public service to linguistic system one describing the language in which the languages in which the public service can be executed, and the other relationship for the languages in which it is described, so that you make explicit that it can be different, so that you can have more descriptive languages, for example, than execution languages.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, we should also keep in mind that as part of the SDG, if you want to keep it as simple as possible, the only language in which the services the information should be shared and made available is English. Even though it's not stated like this in the regulation, that's really the only language required by the regulation.
Sorry.
I'm not sure about that, but...
Sorry, may I add a comment on that?
Sure.
This is Margia from Italy, by the way. Yeah, because I put an issue on probably something connected with this issue here. I mean, we are actually, as you said, you are speaking of different levels of languages. One is describing the service in different languages. Probably I would expect in the European portal in 24 languages, okay? And so we may define that all the properties that are text, okay? These properties are just one for each language, okay? And we can do it very simple, specifying that in the description of that property, as it is done in Scots, for example, okay? But then the language that is used to deliver the service is something different, and we may have different languages according to the channels, okay? Because probably in a phone call, probably I have people speaking in only 3 languages, and in another channel other languages, and overall that public service is delivered in all these languages, okay? So probably this is something to clarify it better in the specification.
Yeah, where the descriptions provided in different languages would be just so having the ability to duplicate and modify different descriptions, yeah, in multiple languages. And then for the execution and really stating this service is available in those languages, there we could use the linguistic system class. Do we all agree with this? So what's also described on the slide? Okay, good. Then I propose to move on to the next. Let's just
So the next issue is about the competent authority. A public service description has one competent authority in the model. How should we model this when different administrations offer the same service? Yeah, I think this refers to the local municipalities who, for example, provide a passport, which is the same service, but because it is delivered by another competent authority, it's a different service. If you get the passport in Brussels or another city, those are two different services, although they share a lot in common, such as description, title, etc., etc. Yep. I don't know if my colleagues want to add something. You could, so as you can read on the slide, you could relate the services to each other, for example, with an identificator or a URI pattern, or even a classification. For example, this is what the single digital gateway does with the information areas. So, yeah, if you classify all municipalities' services that are the same under one information area at the most granular level, that's one way to describe it. But yeah, there is one competent authority for one service.
Yeah,
Also.
and I think it's directly in line with what we discussed so far, with the example of the municipalities that need also to describe their services. So, but if you have points to be shared on this, or something you want to react?
Not, no, but I think that indeed if the public organization describes its service, then it could be that they describe the same thing, but it's not the same because it's described by somewhat different. So you don't start from the public service, you start from who is owning this, and the owner makes a difference.
Yeah, indeed.
So that's, yeah.
But at least they should have a similar classification of public services to point to, in order to make sure that if you are describing the same service, even though the description itself is different, at least they are pointing to the same public service, because that's very important for the end user, of course. Okay.
But you won't be able to manage this similarity across border, for instance, or across region. It's not so obvious, especially that it comes from existing. So you don't manage that now.
True.
So.
But that's also what the SDG is definitely requiring. Is they have a list of procedures, and under those procedures, every country has different numbers of public services that are directly matching those procedures.
But then you are talking of the extended SDG model, huh? Not the core, because here it's not visible, the taxonomy on the public service.
So the taxonomy should at the start be only the Annex 2 for the core. Or at least the procedures that are required for the SDG. And then it's up to each member state to decide, okay, what does it mean for me? What's the mapping between the procedures for which I need to deliver descriptions and the public services I have already described in my Catalogue of Services.
So, but in fact, it has a, sorry, I think there is a problem here, because precisely what I just mentioned, that the public organization defines her services, is just the opposite here, which makes the problem. So there is a problem, because if you start at the public service as a competent authority, it would be that you first have a public service and then you identify who is my competent authority. Whereas the predicate should be, I'm not a specialist, but I ask to the specialist, wouldn't it be that the public organization provides public services or executes public services? No?
For the link and the relationship, I don't think it changed that much the idea that's behind and the way it is described. So we could change the link. The only reason why it's like this so far is because within CPSDEP it's also in this direction with this name, with this as competent authority. So it would mean that if we want to comply, and since some member states are already using this relationship, but for us, we would be in favor of keeping as it is. But the idea that you mentioned, the rationale behind, can be applied. It's not because it's pointing from public service to public organization that in the mind of the people they cannot start from the public organization themselves.
No, indeed. The direction of the arrow doesn't matter actually. It's always by direction. If you look at it in a technical way to as linked data, then it's always bidirectional. So it doesn't really matter.
Can I ask a question? Because not on the direction of this relationship, but maybe on how you need to read the public service clause. I understand that the public service itself must be bound to the public organization that is providing the service or is executing it. But isn't maybe the issue here that there is no relationship to the procedure? So what, because multiple municipalities execute the same procedure, so they have public services, all different public services, but all these public services execute the same procedure. So that's not in the model at the moment, or not directly in the model. There is no class called procedure, and I think that might be missing, because you could say there is one procedure as it is specified in the SDG itself, and then you could say, okay, this public service from this public organization is providing or executing this procedure. Isn't that what you're maybe missing? At least that's what I'm also missing a bit from both your model and the CPSC. It's only, there's no direct.
So with the procedure you mean the different steps that are taken to execute or to deliver the public service? Is this what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we have the action class that was added, that is not shown on the slide, but yeah, let me, voila. We have this class action that delivers the public services. And the action can be either coming from the user, from the citizen or the business, or from the public administration itself. And so it should be definitely fine for different public services to reuse similar set of actions that would be stated according to the model. That's the idea we had behind. And maybe because you mentioned the procedures from the SDG, it's important to notice that there is kind of a paradox within the SDG regulation where they are talking about procedures, but the only definition of procedure that we have mentioned it is a public service, etc. I don't remember by heart. So within our perspective so far was, okay, within the regulation, what they are requiring is public services to be described and for which information in the user perspective should be made available. It's not how the administration is going to provide it, because in the end the user don't really care if internally you need to contact 2 or 3 internal departments in order to deliver your public services. So that's where that's also a differentiation that we make.
Yeah, but I think indeed it's a valid comment that we might want to look into, because there's also something like the rule clause in CPCAP, which was actually, I think it had the intention to provide a link to the procedure, which is sometimes documented in laws. So the different phases or the different, let's say, steps that the public service for delivery goes through. And I think it differs, in my feeling, it also differs a little bit from the action, because it's maybe something more official, the procedure sometimes, rather than the small actions that should be taken. So it's maybe something to have a look at in CPCAP, how the rule clause is covering that.
Yeah. By the way, there is in Article 3 of the SDG, there is a definition of a procedure. So,
Yeah.
but I agree, it's not
Which is
a bit fake, but.
Could we check it on the chat, because I don't remember it by heart. Okay, thanks. Yeah, a sequence of actions that must be taken by users to satisfy the requirements or to obtain from a competent authority a decision. So this is the point of view we took with the class action, because not looking at the procedure, but at the sequence of actions that is made available in order to deliver a public service. And why did we call it public service? Because this is for us the point of view of the users, of the end users, the citizens and the businesses. Because in the definition it states taken by users to satisfy the requirements or to obtain from competent authority a decision, etc., etc. So everything that is made to apply their rights to access services.
Is there a connection of action with event, life event, the business event that already exist in the CPC?
So there is.
Is there an intention of connecting them?
Right now the events are connecting directly to the public service, not to the action itself, because the entry point to go to the sequence of steps of within the procedure or the actions is to go through the public service. So first you say, oh, I would like to know how to access this or how to get that. And based on that, you can use the life events or the business events. So maybe you say, oh, I have a new baby, and based on that, you will access all the services that are related to the fact that you have a newborn. And once you select the right service, normally you should have the section, the different steps, the different actions described.
Yes, I think the procedure is also something that might be missing from the CPSC itself. I posted in the chat a definition that's given in the annex of the CPSC, which says that the public service is the capacity to carry out a procedure. I think that's quite an important sentence, and it might be better to model that procedure than explicitly, because it clarifies. Because I think you're right that given the definition in the SDR, which says the procedure consists of a series of actions, but I don't think that the actions are always the same, depending on who's executing the procedure, so who's delivering the public service. So if different public organizations might execute on a high level the same procedure, but the actions, the steps they do to execute it might be different. So I think your model is in that sense right, that the actions are bound to the public service.
Yeah. My colleague also posted the definition as used within CPSC.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. It's the same one as the one you posted before. Okay. I propose now to move on, but let's continue this discussion also on GitHub, because this is definitely core or very important for defining the SDG data model.
So let's close the issues. As you will see in the presentation we will publish on JoinUp and on the wiki, there are some issues open, quite some important ones, so please have a look at them. We will also publish them on GitHub today or tomorrow.
So you see that, yeah, I will go through now, but I propose we will publish the different the proposed solutions on GitHub, as mentioned by Karian. And now, since we are at the end of the webinar, I propose to move on to the.
Yeah, maybe one more thing. The poll we posted some time ago. We have the results in, and they are quite clear.
So most of the people clearly stated that they would like the 3 different models, as Karen explained a bit earlier. Okay, good. Thanks for the input. Okay. I propose to wrap up and briefly describe the further events. So definitely we need your input on GitHub, and if really impossible for you to make it on GitHub, don't hesitate to share it via email. And why do we push so much for GitHub? Because basically, bit by bit, with the different users using the repository and the issues, we will enrich the set of issues and the discussion on how to solve those issues. While if we start exchanging emails with all of you, it makes it very difficult to follow and to know if you are actually on the same page or if you have different opinions. Voila. So, on the 7th of February, we closed the first public review period. So the 11th today, we have the second webinar about the SDG data model. And so you are, of course, as I just mentioned, until, not the 14th, but the 16th, I put in the chat, the 18th of February, you have the opportunity to share issues. And we will then analyze and categorize them in order to discuss them on the 21st of February in face-to-face during the workshop in Brussels. And we will share more details about the workshop in the coming days. But we can already say that the event will be from 9:30 to 4:30, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much for the really detailed and valuable input we had during the webinar. Sorry that we had no chance to go through all issues, but yeah, that's the counterpart of having discussions. It takes quite some time. We will definitely take into account your input, and let's see each other. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
To come back.